Shopify grows with your business no matter how far or big you grow. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify is there to help you grow. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to grow your business no matter what stage you're in.
This is The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic. If someone asked you to explain good nutrition, what would you say? Maybe you'd answer something like, it's a diet of mostly plant foods with a good balance of macro and micronutrients. Okay, maybe you wouldn't say that, but I'd probably say something like that. But what does that really mean? Because that answer is honestly so vague that it doesn't tell you much. It would be like me saying that good fitness is a healthy blend of strength and cardio. That is true, but completely unhelpful. So what's a plant-based runner to do and eat? Let's find out. Welcome to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic, and my mission is to help you improve your running, your mindset, and your life with science-backed training and plant-based nutrition. On today's show, I'm talking to registered dietitian Natalie Rizzo, the founder of Greenletes and nutrition editor for Today. We'll go over the difference between eating healthy and fueling for endurance. We'll get into the specifics of macronutrients, including what you should look for, and she'll let us know which supplements are worth it and which are a waste. Natalie Rizzo specializes in sports nutrition and plant-based eating. Natalie recently wrote her first cookbook, Planted Performance: Easy Plant-Based Recipes, Meal Plans, and Nutrition for All Athletes. She's a New York native, marathon runner, longtime vegetarian, and mom to 2 boys. Natalie has bylines in many publications, such as Today, Runner's World, Eating Well, All Recipes, and more. So if you're a plant-based runner, or really any kind of runner, this episode will break down exactly what you need to know to fuel your passion. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned all the way to the end of the conversation for another Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. And now my conversation with Natalie Rizzo. Welcome to The Planted Runner, Natalie.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in. I want to talk about good nutrition for athletes, specifically plant-based endurance athletes, runners. I think there's a lot of confusion about what is considered quote unquote healthy eating and what athletes really need. So can you define those two and what the differences are?
Sure. So there is actually a huge difference between what I say kind of general nutrition and sports nutrition. Dietitians who specialize in sports nutrition studied it in school. They have a special certification a lot of times. And the reason for that is because athletes need to eat differently. So what we think of in terms of quote unquote general nutrition, for instance, sugars are bad for you. You shouldn't drink sports drinks. All of those things don't always apply when it comes to runners or endurance athletes. And sports nutrition or nutrition for athletes is a lot of thinking about when you're eating in relation to when you're working out and how that food is actually fueling you or helping you recover from a workout. For instance, thinking about the meal before a workout and how that gives you energy for that workout, or thinking about a meal after a workout and how that helps your muscles recover. So those kinds of things are different. And then, of course, fueling during a workout. For, like I mentioned, sports drinks before, you sometimes you need extra sugar to power you through these workouts. And these are things that the general population, if you're not an endurance athlete, are not necessarily thinking about. You're just thinking about, eating normal nutrients every day, making sure I stay healthy, fight off disease. But there's more to nutrition when you're thinking about fueling.
Yeah. And it's a whole lot different when you're sitting on the couch drinking a Gatorade versus having it after you have run, 2 hours or something like that. Is that right? How does the body process it differently?
Of course. Yeah. The body it's processing it the same way, right? Like sugar is sugar no matter what, but it uses it in different ways. So for instance, your body is actually using sugar, and I kind of hate this distinction because when I'm saying sugar, I mean all types of sugars. It could be sugars from jelly beans. It could be sugars from a banana, but all of that gets broken down to glucose in your body. And that glucose fuels you for running. And what happens is during a run, you're actually using all of that glucose to power you through, but it runs out after a certain amount of time. So after around 60 minutes, the amount of glucose that you have stored in your system in something called glycogen, which I'm sure a lot of runners have heard that word before, is depleted. And drinking a Gatorade is actually giving you that sugar you need to continue to power you through. So the way you could kind of think about it is you're using it as you're drinking it. Whereas if you're a runner, if you're sitting on the couch, you're actually not really using it. Your body is storing it as fat. So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I want to do today really is to go into the macros, because people talk about macros all the time. And, I'm not sure that everybody really understands the deep dive into them. So let's get into the macronutrients, which are, of course, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. We'll start with carbs. So, when we say, oh, I'm going to have some carbs, people are thinking rice or bread or cupcakes, but it's a lot more than that. Can you talk about those?
Sure. Yes. And that actually drives me crazy because it is. People think just white rice, white bread, cupcakes, like you said. But carbs are so much more. All fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, even there's a little bit in nuts and seeds, but things like that. Those are the healthy carbs. That's why 45 to 60% of all the calories that you take in, which actually it could even be more for people who are marathon runners, ultra marathon runners, should come from carbs. And that's just not starchy carbs. It's a lot of the fruits and vegetables. And with that, obviously, like I talked about before, it breaks down to glucose to give you energy, but there's so much more. You're getting all your fiber needs in there, which fiber is necessary, obviously, for digestion, but it's also necessary for heart health. You're getting a ton of vitamins and minerals in the carbs. You're getting antioxidants, which fight the inflammation that you get during a run. You're getting phytochemicals, which are things that are not going to see on the nutrition label, but they're really important. There's tons of research to show things like flavonoids help reduce your risk of cancer and chronic diseases and things like that. So carbs are actually incredibly important. And I think runners are becoming more, they realize it more that carbs are a huge part of their diet, but there's still a lot of runners that are still kind of scared of carbs. So you'll hear so many dietitians who work with athletes talking about, please stop limiting your carbs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned fiber, and I think a lot of people get worried about fiber as runners. We are worried that we are going to have bathroom stops that we don't want to have on the run. So, common advice before a race or a really important workout is to limit your fiber. But if you're running a lot and racing a lot, that could lead to a low fiber diet in general. So it's it's a challenge. So how would you address fiber for runners?
Yeah, it's definitely very hard, especially on a plant-based diet. Anyone who's ever trained for a marathon before knows, like a huge part of your diet is probably beans, and then you're trying to limit them, and it's so hard. It's about kind of timing, and every single person is so different. For instance, some people can eat a bean soup and be perfectly fine, and then some people, that does not agree with them. They're going to be running to the bathroom. So it's kind of thinking about, honestly, when you're timing your fiber and how that's going to make your stomach feel. We as dietitians talk a lot about poop and going to the bathroom, and
we do too as runners. We talk about poop a lot. It's okay.
Exactly. So one of the things that I always say is in the morning before a race, you actually want to poop, right? Like
for sure,
you want to make that happen. So you don't want to limit fiber to the point where you're ended up being constipated, but you want to make sure that Yeah, you want to keep the foods in there that you recognize and that you know work for you. So when it comes to nutrition, especially for runners, a lot of it is trial and error, and it actually is a part of your training. We think about
Yes.
training the muscles and working up to certain distances. Nutrition is the same thing. You have to kind of know from the beginning of whatever you're training for that you're also training your body to handle fiber and figure out when it works for you and kind of do some trial and error, which can be difficult, but over time you start to getting a groove with it.
Yeah. And I've noticed anecdotally, I've never seen any science on this, but I obviously coach a lot of plant-based runners, or fully plant-based or mostly plant-based. And I have found that people who are on a very healthy, mostly whole foods, plant-based diet, they can handle fiber before running. They can handle a normal diet. They don't even change their diet before a marathon, and they're perfectly fine. They don't have any bathroom issues. And it just makes me wonder if they've trained their gut to handle fiber and it's no longer causing them to have bathroom issues. Have you seen that or heard of that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not going to say his name right, but the fastest man in the world, Eliud
Kipchoge.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
He recently just said that he eats oatmeal before every race. Oatmeal is fiber. It's straight fiber.
Yeah.
And I mean, you would think it would be more complicated than that, but I'm sure that just works for him. And that's, that's how it is for certain people. Some people are better with just, a white bread or a white bagel or something, but definitely you can tolerate certain things. And that's also the thing that I say to people when they are worried about adding more fiber to their diet because they want to go more plant-based. Because I talk to a lot of runners who maybe still eat meat, but want to kind of transition to a plant-based diet and are worried about the fiber and are worried about the bloating. I always say do it in small increments because beans may make you feel gassy, but if you eat a small amount of them and kind of build up to it, you're probably able to tolerate it after some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Train that gut. So, let's switch to fat, the next macronutrient. So, I have, as a plant-based athlete myself, I try to be relatively high protein, not crazy high protein, but I have noticed that fat comes along for the ride if you are a vegan athlete and trying to hit higher numbers. Tofu, for example, has quite a bit of fat in it. Nuts and seeds, obviously, are high fat as well. So I don't think about fat very often. Is this a good approach, or tell me what you think of that?
Yeah, I kind of agree. And I actually was just working with a runner who was, I can't remember if he was marathon or ultra marathon. And he said, I think I eat too much fat because he was a vegan. And he's like, I eat a lot of nuts and seeds. And I feel the same way. I love peanut butter. It's probably my favorite thing to put on everything. I think if you are eating a lot of nuts and seeds, you don't need to worry about it so much. Mm-hmm. But there is still a fear around fat. So I still get the questions of like, should I eat nuts? Should I have seeds? And if that's you, then maybe you're skimping on fat. And fat really does play a role in keeping you full. It plays a role in fueling, actually, because the body, after it uses up glucose, it turns to fat, which is not necessarily a crazy efficient process and is not something that you want to do. I know that there is some people who fuel with fat, and that's a whole nother topic, but it's not.
Well, they don't run very fast. I got to tell you.
Exactly. That's a whole nother topic, but you do use a little bit of it for fueling. So fat is important, but I think people who really do focus on plants and eat plenty of nuts and seeds don't need to worry about it so much, like you said.
Yeah. I think the other fear, of course, is a lot of people go into running. They pick up running for body composition reasons. They want to lose a little weight. And the first thing they think about when they realize, wait a second, fat has 9 calories per gram, that's the first thing they throw out, of the bus. They say, wow, I can have like 5 peanuts and how many calories is that? Because of the fat. So I think there's a lot of runners that cut out fat first. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah. So first off, if you're running a decent amount of miles, then you probably need more calories.
Right.
And people don't always like to think about that because calories has been drilled into our head, but you never want to be eating unless you're trying to lose weight, which training for running and losing weight don't always go hand in hand, really, most of the time. So you don't actually want to be consuming less than you're burning off, because then you're under fueling and that's going to affect your performance. So if you're taking in those extra calories, it's not the end of the world, and it's probably helping you recover in a way, because the other part of it is that fat is incredibly satiating. So if you have a tablespoon or two of peanut butter, if you have a handful of nuts, you're probably going to feel a little fuller than if you were to have, a handful of berries. Well, you're definitely going to feel a lot fuller than if you had a handful of berries, because one, it's more calories, but it does actually contribute to that feeling of fullness. So that's the other thing. You don't have to eat a ton of it to actually get the benefits from it, especially if you're worried about calories. But the bottom line is really don't be worried about calories.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, let's get to number 3, which is protein. Oh my gosh. Okay. So if you're a vegetarian, vegan, plant-based, whatever it is, the first question that people will ask, well, where do you get your protein? So tell us where we get our protein, why we need it, and how much do athletes need? Because the guidelines they're honestly confusing. So let's set this straight.
Oh, it's so confusing. And every single vegetarian or vegan has heard that before. And I think most people who listen to this podcast probably know where they get their protein.
That's true.
But then again, maybe not. And it's things like, soy is really one of the top sources of vegan protein, because you're going to get the most per ounce in things like tofu, tempeh, soy milk. And then you're having things like seitan, which is a wheat gluten, and lentils are another one of my favorites. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second, but lentils are a huge one. So things like that, legumes, beans, but it really comes down to eating a balance of a bunch of things. I think that's what people kind of miss out on when it comes to plant-based eating, is that if you eat meat, of course, you eat 3 ounces of chicken, you're getting 20 something grams of protein. That's easy. If you eat a plant-based diet, you have to kind of combine things, because if you combine things, that's how it makes up the bulk of your protein. So maybe you're eating tofu, but you also put brown rice in it, which has some protein. And then maybe you put in some almonds on top, which have some protein. And you put in some broccoli, which also has some protein. So I think if you put all the things together, that's where protein comes in. Now, in terms of how much you need, that's the confusing part.
Yes, it is.
There's not like one number, and it always is based on your weight. And the research that I've seen most recently, the other confusing part is this is all in kilograms. So for those of us in the United States, that's a little bit confusing.
Right.
It's anywhere from 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And that's based on your activity level, your size, your goals. One of the ways that I kind of tell people, especially runners or athletes, to figure it out, and this is a roundabout estimate, is maybe take your weight in pounds, divide it in half, and think about that as like a good goal of the amount of protein that you should have in a day. And of course, it could be more, it could be less, but that's at least a roundabout number.
Yeah. Well, and protein is satiating too. I've noticed for sure that when I focus on protein, I'm fuller, and I don't need to have, if I'm just having rice and beans, which is protein, of course, but if I add tofu, I'm definitely more full. When I focus on, I'm trying to get 25 to 30 grams per meal, I am much more satiated when I have protein. But other people aren't, which is weird. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, so protein is one of those nutrients that fills you up. But what the interesting thing about plant-based protein, and I think this is another thing that gets lost on people, is that you do have to eat more of it. So like I said before about the 3 ounces of chicken, if you were to eat 3 ounces of tofu, I kind of know these numbers, that's probably only maybe 9 grams of protein. So you want to eat double that, maybe 6 ounces of tofu. So you're eating more, and there's kind of a name for it as volumetrics, which you're eating more on a plant-based diet, but those things tend to be lower in calories,
right.
A little lower in protein. So it's okay to eat more of it to get the same amount of nutrients you have to eat. And people don't always eat enough, and that's why a lot of times athletes are underfueled or maybe feeling hungry all the time. The other part of it is thinking about when you're eating in relation to your workout. So I know a lot of athletes who do not refuel or recover after a workout because they're not hungry, which is totally normal. Your stomach feels weird after you maybe ran for 2 hours. But if you can get in even just a little bit of protein, anything like that, that really helps from that kind of bounce back you feel 2-3 hours later where you're so hungry that you're going to eat anything that's put in front of you. So it's all about kind of timing too.
Is there a rule or a rule of thumb that we should be thinking about after we come back from that 2-hour run, carbs to protein ratio, something like that?
Yeah, it's usually a 3-to-1. And I'm sure a lot of runners have 3-to-1, carbs to protein, should have specified. I think a lot of runners have heard of this with chocolate milk. And if you're plant-based, obviously you don't drink chocolate milk, but soy chocolate milk is actually another good one you could do. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is just because you do actually need the carbs after a run because, like I said before, you go through your carb stores. Mm-hmm. And there's also been a lot of research to show that when you have some carbs, it actually helps with protein absorption. Mm-hmm. So if you have more carbs and some protein, that's, going to help you recover. But at the end of the day, if you really just feel not great and you could eat anything, it's going to make you feel better than not eating anything.
After a short break, I'll be back with more of my conversation with Natalie Rizzo. I want to tell you about a unique opportunity for you to get stronger, faster, and stay motivated to hit all your running and nutrition goals this year, and that is to join the PR team. Each member of the team gets a custom training plan made by me for you based on your unique fitness, goals, and lifestyle. Everything you need to crush your running dreams is included, such as strength training, recovery, and even cross-training if you want it. I include weekly mental strength training as well as tips and nutrition guides. But here's where it gets really cool. The group has its own page in the app where we share workouts, ask training questions, and get feedback from me and the other teammates. And each week, I create an exclusive private podcast just for the team based on the questions I get and what I see in their training each week. And I usually end up sharing behind the scenes and exclusive sneak peeks with the team that I don't share anywhere else. So instead of joining a Facebook group or sitting through another Zoom call, you get to listen to tailored advice on the run, and you don't have to do all of this alone. If you are ready to take your running to the next level and join an amazing team of runners, head to theplantedrunner.com/group and join us today. It's more affordable than you think, and I can't wait to have you.
There is no hood like parenthood. When you meet a fellow parent, you just kind of get each other on a whole nother level. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, aka their mom sense and dad sense. I've had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton. It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
Episodes release every Thursday. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Join my tribe at that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you.
And we're back with more of my conversation with Natalie Rizzo. Should we be tracking all this stuff? Do you recommend that as a registered dietitian? Because, when I tell people, talk about tracking, they're like, oh my God, that's neurotic. I don't want to do it. Or you get the data hungry runners who are like, yes, I'm going to track every single thing that I put in my body. And what's your opinion on tracking?
I feel like it depends on the person. I always say when it comes to nutrition, I like to meet people where they're at. So it depends on what kind of person you are. I personally have tracked before and kind of like it, but I also only do it for maybe a week at a time. Mm-hmm. And then I can kind of see, because I think most people are like this, you kind of have patterns and you can kind of see, okay, I keep eating peanut butter here and I keep eating tofu here. And maybe my fat is higher than my protein and I really need to do this. And I do think it's beneficial for that because if you really have no idea how much protein you're eating throughout the day, how much fat you're eating throughout the day, why maybe you're feeling super hungry later in the afternoon, tracking kind of gives you a sense of, oh, I didn't even think about the fact that I'm doing this in the morning, or I'm skipping a meal here, or something like that. And then you can look back at it, and it is helpful.
Yeah.
If you kind of have a neurotic personality where it's going to go way overboard, then it may not be for you.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
if you're just like to kind of see the data, you see it and then you adjust, and then you don't have to do it all the time. I do think it's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I always give this example. Like, I was making these smoothies when I first started running, and I was like, oh, walnuts are healthy, I'll put those in. Oh, flax seeds are healthy, I'll put those in. Oh, banana, that's good. Oh, soy milk, that's it. And my list of ingredients was, a mile long, and I finally tracked it, and I was eating 700 to 900 calories in one shake. And I'm not very big. So that was way too much. And I was just like, I had no idea until I started tracking. I'm like, oh, maybe I don't need to add everything to the smoothies just because it's healthy, So it can be beneficial that way too.
Absolutely. I know that with even salads too. There's this place in New York City called Sweet Green that I'll order from sometimes. And you notice, like, as you start adding ingredients, I'm like, why is this salad 900 calories?
Exactly.
Like, I added roasted sweet potato, and then I added avocado and all of this stuff. So I feel the same way.
Yeah. I mean, I get athletes who say that all the time. I eat healthy. Why am I not losing weight? Or why I eat healthy and I run. It's challenging with running, of course, because there's, like we were talking about before, the goal of performance and the goal of weight loss are different, but many people have both goals, which is challenging. So I think that, I do the same thing as you. I recommend that if you want to track, you should learn what you're eating, get an education on where you're at, but then stop it after a while.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is helpful for people who are trying to lose weight, but I do think that that's a different population than people who are trying to train seriously. So I 100% agree.
Yeah. The next question I have is for the people who are really into whole foods, plant-based. We're talking, the OG kind of no oil, no processed food. I want to be whole foods all the way as much as possible. So is it really possible to be 100% or 99% on a whole food, plant-based diet and still be a high performance athlete?
Oh yeah, more power to you if you can do that. I think you have to have the time and energy to do it. I think it's possible. But also you have to think of what you consider to be processed, because processed is tofu. Processed is bread. If you ever eat bread. Yeah, processed is soy sauce. Like, are we really eating just everything in its natural form? If you could do that, amazing. Like, I'm sure that your body is, your cholesterol levels are great, but also maybe there are some deficits in there unless you're paying a lot of attention to making sure you get enough protein, making sure you get enough fats and all of that stuff. So I think you have to be really, really aware of the nutrients in the foods if you're doing it that way. I have 2 little kids, and it's hard. I cook basically all of our meals, and we don't do a lot of takeout, but I still rely on, soy milk or tofu or bread or all of the season, like even some, jarred salsa to put on things. I have no problem with that, because it just makes it easier to eat healthy, I think, when you have some of those convenience foods.
Absolutely. I don't consider anything you just mentioned a convenience food at all. I think those are staples, but there are a lot of convenience foods that just make sense for runners, bars, shakes, powders. What do you feel about those? Can we add those in? They are certainly helpful, convenient, and they get the job done, but are we sacrificing something by using those products?
I think it depends on how much you're using of them. If, for breakfast, it's a protein shake, and then for lunch, it's a bar and something else. And then for dinner, it's a microwave dinner. Then, of course, you're not eating a lot of whole natural foods, which there are benefits to eating whole natural foods, obviously. But I do think, for instance, if you have a smoothie after a run and you have 3 minutes and you want to put a protein powder in it because you have no other protein, go for it. Do that. That's going to be helpful for you. I know personally for myself, protein bars are incredibly helpful for me to take to work and have between meals because I just don't have the time to do other things.
I'm so glad you said that. I do the same thing.
I'm starving. And also the alternative is that I'm going to probably go buy something that's worse. So,
right.
So yeah, I would rather have something that has protein in and is going to keep me full than, buy some chocolate covered pretzels or something.
Right.
So,
yeah. I think that the inclination for a lot of runners is, it's a stereotype that runners are type A, that we are perfectionists, that we're data driven, that we're just like, I'm going to do everything perfect in my life or I'm not going to do it at all. And it's just like, I want to fuel myself perfectly. And I think we get in trouble. Like our healthy diet causes us a lot of trouble, like not just processed foods, but when it comes to salt. So I'd love to talk about this for a few minutes. What is your advice with salt for runners? Because part of the whole foods plant-based diet is it's naturally low in salt, right? But runners, we need a little bit more. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if I've come across many runners who aren't, to be honest, I haven't come across many runners who don't want to eat or like are not eating any processed foods because it's incredibly hard, like we said.
Yes.
But yeah, if you are doing that, you definitely are not eating enough salt, probably because when, for instance, you eat even like a roasted broccoli, putting a little bit of salt on that, salt is a natural electrolyte that the body needs for hydration is one thing, and then also just cellular function. Mm-hmm. Salt helps the body work. And the daily value of salt is 2,300 milligrams, meaning that you can have up to 2,300 milligrams without any negative effects. You should have that. It's helping you live a healthy life. And that's for the normal person. The athlete who is sweating a lot, I've worked with runners who incorporate salt tabs into their workouts because they sweat a lot and they need that extra salt. That salt helps you take in fluid easier. It helps the cells actually absorb the fluid. So salt is like an important part of fueling for sure. And that's why sports drinks have sodium in them. It's not just for taste or anything like that. It's very important. So yeah, salt is important. And if you're eating that whole natural diet where there is no processed salt, then you definitely should be using the salt shaker, putting it on your veggies and making sure that you have some in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And most runners know if they are salty sweaters. They come home from runs crusty. Their dog is licking their skin all the time. They got white stains on their shirt. If you're losing a lot of salt, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think you should. And I also think, we say this, but then I also talk to some runners sometimes who don't drink at all or something like that because they just think it makes them feel bad or during a run. So I think if you start to notice that you're having kind of that crustiness on your face, like you were talking about, or you're feeling really terrible after a run, it could be something with hydration. A lot of times I think it is something with hydration and sometimes fueling, but hydration is the thing I think that gets overlooked more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was one of those runners that I'm a camel. I don't really need to drink water. I did not drink as much water or hydrate as much as I should when I was like really, really into marathon training. And I will tell you, I got a kidney stone. And so, yes. So I tell people all the time, please drink, please drink, please drink. So now I hydrate all the time. That was a very painful lesson. So I hope no one else has to go through it. I know, definitely. Because I was under drinking. I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, right? But please drink, but not too much.
100%. And we think we're invincible as runners. Because
yes.
You can run a marathon, you can run for however many hours. We're good, we're healthy, but these things do play into your overall health. So
absolutely.
I'm glad you're sharing that story.
I know. It's painful. Worse than childbirth. I swear. So bad. Okay. So supplements. Do we need to be taking all the things? Do we need to take multivitamins, B12, vitamin D, iron, or the latest, greatest, fabulous supplement. Do we have to do that?
No.
Ooh, okay.
Bottom line. I mean, some of them, yes. Vegans, B12 is hard to get. I will say that. So I do think that supplementing with the B12 is probably beneficial. Also because vitamin B, all B vitamins are what we call water soluble, meaning that if your body doesn't use them, you just pee them out. Mm-hmm. So there's really no risk in taking a vitamin B12, and B12 goes into energy. It helps with energy.
Can we do it with fortified foods, or do we have to take a pill?
You can do it with fortified foods for sure. It's usually in things like, I'm pretty sure like soy milk will probably,
even in tofu.
Yeah,
nutritional
in tofu.
Yeast. Yeah,
exactly. Well, nutritional yeast, that's like a given on a vegan diet, right?
That's right.
But the other ones, for instance, like iron, please, this is one that I have to always tell people, please don't take iron unless you know that you need it, because it's actually incredibly dangerous. I know people who have hemochromatosis, which is an overload of iron in their body. That's dangerous. So I think that we get into a dangerous territory with some supplements. And then vitamin D is really the only other one that it's hard to get because of the sun and skin level. If your skin tone is a certain tone, you may not absorb it well. So that's one that you could potentially take if you usually get a blood test and you can see if you're deficient in it. But all the other crazy supplements that are out there, maybe they have some benefit. I mean, creatine is one that there's definitely been shown to be some benefit.
I like creatine.
Definitely. Muscular power, endurance, but it's not the end of the world if you don't take it.
Sure.
I guess that's people think I have to take all these supplements in order to be healthy and be the fastest runner ever. Some of them are beneficial, but they're not going to be detrimental if you don't take them.
How about ELA, algae oil, that kind of thing?
Yes. So that actually is beneficial. However, it's incredibly expensive. So it's like hard for me to always recommend it. That's so omega-3s, which are usually from fatty fish. And that's a person who would eat animal foods would take a fish oil. There's a ton of research to show that that's beneficial for heart health, for brain health, stuff like that. And especially because the recommendation is to eat fish twice a week. Most people don't do that, so that's why they take fish oil. The vegan side of that is called an alga oil, which comes from algae. That's the only source of that type of omega-3 that is beneficial for all the things like the brain and the heart, but it's very expensive. Mm-hmm. So it's fine. And like, obviously it's beneficial and it's great if you want to take it, but if you can't afford it, you can still get omega-3s through nuts, seeds, oils, things like that.
Okay. All right, good. Any other kind of last minute things that you want to say overall for runners specifically? Like what are the most important things if you have to boil it all down as far as our nutrition goes?
I think the most important things are kind of like I said before, meeting people where they're at. Everyone is different. And just because someone said that this worked for them doesn't necessarily mean it works for you. You kind of have to figure out what works for you, especially with the time of life you're in, the time you have, that kind of stuff. Because I know when I was 25, I had a lot more time to do things than I do now, and a lot more time to cook and focus on fueling and all of that. So doing what works for you, but also making sure that you incorporate, as much plants as possible. Obviously, I would think that people who are listening are probably plant-based, but if you're not, trying to incorporate as much plants as you can is always going to be the healthiest option, really. That's always my top tip, is just go with plants.
Love it. Love it. Well, I think that is a great place to wrap it up, but tell everyone where they can connect with you.
Sure. So my brand is called Greenletes, and it's basically plant-based athletes, nutrition for plant-based athletes. So you can find me on Instagram there. And I also have a website, greenletes.com. And yeah, feel free to send me a message with any questions. I'm always happy to chat about any of this stuff.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Natalie.
Thanks for having me.
And now it's time for the Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. Today's topic is the running paradox. There are actually several paradoxes that I can think of in running, but I'd say the one that is most important is the mental skill you need to master. It's the skill of holding back when you feel good and holding on when you want to stop. At the beginning of a long run or race, we should feel pretty good, and it's tempting to start out too fast. In fact, it's the number one thing that ruins your run. That's because the good feelings soon fade, and the run gets harder as you go. When it gets too hard, all you want to do is stop. But if you hold back when you feel good and hold on when you'd rather stop, that's when you'll discover your true potential. Thank you for listening to The Planted Runner, part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Don't forget that you can win free access to one of my sprint session masterclasses just for writing an Apple Podcast review. So be sure to write yours right after your run today. Reviews are the number one way to boost this show's reach, and it's a great way to tell me what you'd like to hear next because I read every single one. Have a great run today.
Women's Running Stories, where we explore the intersection between running and life. Because every woman who is committed to a running journey has a story to tell, and this is where you'll find those stories. I am host and producer Cherie Louise Turner. I'm a 53-year-old runner, and together with original music by musician and runner Cormac O'Regan, we bring these inspirational stories to life. Please join us to fuel your adventures.